Hi, this is Robin, and this video is about moving from color to black and white for fine art landscapes in Photoshop. Now, when we think of landscape photography, or at least when I think of landscape photography, we typically think about seeing epic expanses and very vibrant colors. In fact, if you've ever tried the auto-assisted landscape mode on some cameras, you'll find that what they do is actually boost the vibrance of colors in the scene. But landscapes can be equally effective as fine art photos in black and white. And that's the focus of this video. So in this workshop, I'll do three things. I'll share a few examples of black and white fine art landscape photos by famous artists to give you a sense of the characteristics of this style of imagery, as well as to give you some possible artists to check out for inspiration. So we'll be looking at these photos here in just a bit. The second thing I'm going to do is provide some quick tips on what to look for as qualities of landscape photos that should work well if converted to black and white. And then the final and third thing that I'm going to do in the video is walk through a three-phased step-by-step Photoshop demo that shows you how to convert a color landscape image to a fine art black and white landscape result. So in the description below this video, I'll include the start times for each chapter or topic that I'm going to cover. So in other words, these will be clickable links in case you want to hop around or break up watching it if it's too much to watch this all in one sitting. I'll also include a link to the stock image that I'm going to use in the demo. And then finally, I will include links to other black and white related tutorial videos that are on my channel that I've published in the past, and that includes some information relating to minimalist landscapes, as well as low-key or dark and high-key or bright black and white looks and how to achieve them in Photoshop. So there's that additional information in the description below this video. Okay, so let's get started here. The first thing I said I was going to do is share some examples of black and white landscape photos. And we have these three examples right here. The first one here at upper left is by Ansel Adams, and it's titled Rain, Yosemite Valley. He made this picture in 1940. And typically, when you look at Adams' work, I find that he focuses on compositions that capture these kind of sweeping landscapes, mostly in the American West, but he also does some capturing of abstract details that he presents in black and white. And you can see, the drama of this. You can see how he's using light. I mean, you get all the details of this foreground piece of landscape here, and look at Bridalveil Fall and the way the light is hitting that is directing the viewer's eye right down into tunnel view, this whole area right through here, as well as this foreground object. And then he's made good use of a full tonal range of blacks, whites, and nice rich middle grays. And he's used the faded gray in the background to give you some atmospheric perspective as well as a sense of depth. The second example black and white landscape here is by Bill Brandt. That's this one here, and it's called Top Withens, Yorkshire. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He is basically a contemporary of Adams, so he made this image in 1945. Brandt is a British photographer, and he's known for very high contrast. You can sort of see it here, black and white landscape photographs of the British scenery. So he'll have these very deep blacks, he'll have rich grays, which you get in here, and then he'll have very bright whites. So you can see that's a good example of his work. One of the things I think he prided himself on and tried to achieve with his black and white landscape photography was to capture the emotion of places versus just surface beauty. So that is a second example there. We have Adams and we have Brandt. The third example here is Michael Kenna, and he is a contemporary British photographer. And this image of his is titled Curious Cloud, Campo Imperatore, Abruzzo, Italy. And this was made in 2016. So he too is a British photographer. As I said, he's more contemporary, but his work, as he said, is very inspired by Brandt's as well as by Japanese Shinto works. Michael Kenna. Kenna is very renowned for his long exposure, and sometimes he even has those exposures last for hours. Landscape photos, you can see a bit of it here in the motion, and of course, these areas are all still, so they look sharp, but you get the slow motion look of the long exposure there. He's also known, besides the long exposures, for simplicity of lines and abstract forms. And so you can see the lines, and again, how he's using leading lines here to point the viewer back to the subjects he wants to have them focus on. And, again, to me at least, the shape of the cloud is mirroring some of the shape of the mountain. So the composition really hangs together as a whole and has a very dramatic look. You don't need color in any of these to appreciate the landscapes that these artists have captured. Kenna, I would say, also wants his work to be mysterious, somewhat poetic, and meditative. This struck a chord with me because it reminded me of one of Magritte's images, only his is a rock floating in air. I like surrealist art. So I thought that these were really good examples to get a sense for what black and white landscape photography can look like. Now, when we look at these and think about, what are some of the key characteristics of fine art, black and white landscape photography, these things that I'm going to mention, I think, are some of the key points that are not only embodied here in these images and these examples and the works by these artists generally, but to me, they also suggest which color photos will convert best to black and white. So you need to look at your color photos and say, do they have these kind of characteristics that I'm going to point out here? Because not every color landscape can be impactful as a fine art black and white landscape. Certainly all photos can be converted to black and white, but that doesn't mean they'll be successful or impactful as black and whites, especially if it's kind of a unitonal, in other words, all the same tone kind of across the whole image. So that brings me to my first point of characteristics to look at, not only for images to convert, but to see if you've converted successfully. So what you want in a black and white landscape photo is broad tonal range. And by that, I mean you want deep shadows, you want bright highlights, you want rich midtones. And I think all of these artists here have achieved that. Look for textures, shapes, lines, and patterns. So again, textures, shapes, lines. It's not a straight line like a geometric line, but these are lines through the image. Those things are going to be important to compensate for the lack of color. You also want to look for dramatic lighting because, again, you want to reveal things such as textures, shapes, lines, and patterns because they will help create mood and emotional depth. So again, you get stormy skies or you get this really unique cloud with the shadows and the light. You get the light hitting the textures of the different greenery or grasses in the landscape. So dramatic lighting is the third important thing to think about or to incorporate into your black and white landscape images. Dramatic weather is another, as you can see here with these storm clouds and the dramatic cloud here. So cloud formations, a dark sky, look at the darkness and it's sort of like a gradient down to lighter here. Those will make for interesting black and whites. You want a strong composition. How do shapes and tones arrange themselves in the frame? How have you framed the content of your scene? So these things are all very well balanced in these particular compositions here. So look at balance. Be sure you don't have a lot of overlaps between things. Be sure that the items that you want to stand out in your images do stand out. And so, for instance, someplace in this image by Brandt, he sort of obviously wants this house or this building to kind of drop out. He's made it so dark. So where we are supposed to focus is on the landscape and the sky. And so, use the tones in the black and white to help direct attention to what you want people to think is most important in your black and white landscape. And then the final characteristic I think is important for black and white photography and landscape photography is simplicity and or high contrast. Approaches that are, things that are used to remove distractions and put attention on light, form, and texture. If you have too many details for somebody to look at either in color or black and white, you're going to lose your viewers because they won't know where to focus and where to look in your image. And if you have something you want to convey with that image, they won't know what the takeaway is because there'll be just too much for them to absorb. So I'd say those are the key characteristics to think about, both in knowing which of your color photos to convert to black and white, as well as once you do the conversion to see if it is a successful black and white landscape photo. Now, I am going to pause for a moment and set up for the demo, which will be the next part of this video here. But quickly, I do just want to remind you that if you are new to my channel or have not subscribed yet, and you want to be notified of my future Photoshop workshops, please click the free subscribe button and the black bell icon below this video to get a single notification from YouTube when I release new content each month. If you've already subscribed, so in other words, just click subscribe once already on only one other video, there's no need to click again. You only do it once and you're all set. So I'm going to pause here and get set up for the demo of how to convert a full color landscape photo to black and white. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. So this is going to be the demo image that I'm going to use here, and I'm going to convert this image, which is a full color image, a seascape, landscape, to a black and white fine art photo look. This photo, just to give credit where credit is due, is a stock photo from Unsplash, and this is the maker's name right here. I don't want to butcher his name, so I assume it's a he. So I will let you read that. And I will, as I said, include a link to this photo if it's okay for me to do so in the description below the video if you want to try to walk through some of these steps using the same image before you work with your own image. What I'm going to show here in this demo is a 3-stage process. So first stage will be pre-conversion adjustments. The second stage will be black and white conversion process. And the third and final stage will be the post black and white conversion artistic adjustments. So it's sort of the finishing touches. I highly suggest that you make pre-conversion adjustments before leaping into a black and white conversion. You want to try to maximize the tonal separation and contrast, and you want to ensure that strong details will come through in black and white, and also to set the groundwork for an artistic black and white look. And getting this image in good shape first, or getting your image in good shape first, will help you to have a more successful black and white conversion. Okay, so let's start stage 1, which is the pre-conversion to black and white stage. So I have this image open, and because it is a stock image, it's a JPEG, so I have it open here in Photoshop. I'm going to assume that you typically shoot in RAW. So open your image so it opens into Adobe Camera Raw. So I will take this image into the Camera Raw filter now just to simulate where you would typically be opening into versus opening into Photoshop. So I'm going to duplicate this background layer. I'll just drag it to the bottom to the Add New Layer icon, bottom of the Layers panel there, and that makes a copy. Or you can do, when you're on that background layer, a Control or Command J to jump up a copy there. All right, so now I'm going to go up to the filter, Camera Raw filter, go into the Camera Raw interface. Okay, so when you open your raw image, you will come into this interface here, and you'll notice that my highlighter doesn't carry through into here, so I'll try to be sure I narrate where I am so you can see more easily where I am. Okay, so we're going to start in the light panel here at the upper right in the right-hand settings panel where it says light. And what I want to do here is adjust exposure, highlights, shadows, and contrast. I want to be sure, again, we're talking about landscape, so there's going to likely be sky. I want to be sure that any blown highlights, like in clouds or whatever, are reduced. And I want to ensure that any details in the scene are visible and clear, so they will be clear for the conversion to black and white. So let me start here in this light panel. And again, I am not showing you a formula. I'm showing you what to my eye seems appropriate to this image. And so you'll just have to slide these sliders to taste to suit the images that you're working with. So I will start by trying to take down some of these whites. I don't feel compelled to go in the order these things appear here. I look for what I think needs adjusting, and I start with that. So I'm going to go to the left to bring down some of the highlights. I go a little way and then I look at the image and then I adjust and do some more. A little much. I don't want to get it too dark. And if you're not that familiar with Camera Raw, because I know there's a spectrum of experience levels with Photoshop, so I tend to narrate, so sorry for those of you who are more advanced. But if you pull it to the right, you'll see that to the right on these sliders is bright. So that means to the right is brighter, and this is darker, so to the left is darker. Okay, then I'll do the whites, because again, I'm thinking about the clouds. So if I put the highlights down, I want to counterbalance a little bit with the whites. And I might still go back and adjust some of these. All right, let me leave that one there. Then I'll do the shadows. Open them up a little bit. And you can see this image is a little bit on the hazy and green side, so we're going to have to deal with that too, but that's to come. And then I want to get a little bit more richness in the blacks in here, because again, with the black and white conversion, I just want to be sure the blacks aren't too hazy or washed out. So on my black slider, I'll go to the left to make them darker and richer. Hopefully reduce some of the haze. And I'm just watching the image as I do this. Too much, don't want to go too dark. Okay, and then contrast, I'll end up here with the exposure and contrast. Let me do exposure first, because then I'll see where I want to go with the contrast. So I'll just add a little hint of exposure here. This helps if you click the handle. There we go. Okay, let me stay there because I don't want to blow out the clouds again. Typically, for most images, I will take contrast to the left because you can tend to alter colors and you can blow out details if you go right. So if you come just a little left, you can recover details. But let me just see in this one, because I'm going to the black and white, if adding just a little light hit of contrast helps to define things a little better or not. Very subtly here. Don't want to get it too crunchy. All right, and then maybe I'll take the whites down just a little bit, compensate for that. Okay, so those are the settings that I'm going to use here in this light panel. And you'll see if you go to the right of light, there's this little icon. So if you click, you can see, if you watch the image, not where I'm clicking, you can see the impact that those changes have made. So it's definitely kind of crisped this up and brought out the details a little bit more and brightened up the image. So that's good to my sense of what I think I want to achieve here. Next, oh, look at my highlighter popped up. Okay, next, we'll want to go to the effects panel here. So I'm going to be working with mid-tone, clarity, and texture here. And again, it will help the details translate better in the black and white conversion stage. So, and then I'm just going to do things subtly here, because in the post-conversion stage, then we can always make even more adjustments if necessary. So I'm going to start with clarity, and I'm going to add a little bit of clarity, which means, again, if it's dark to the left and light to the right, we're adding more clarity to the right, and that's the direction I will go. Okay, again, I don't want to go too crazy, because I don't want it to overdo it. And then texture, I'll add some more texture too, because again, I want to bring out texture here. I want to bring out texture in the ocean, the water. And again, this is a relatively low-res stock photo, so you're going to see pixelation and noise, and I'm not going to try to correct it like I would something that's my own image, so you spend more time than me just trying to show you the steps and process. All right, I like even numbers, so I'm going to go up to 15. Okay, and then I'm just going to do a very, very light dehaze. Dehaze will help kind of cut through a little bit of this, but dehaze, well, typically on any image, I try to stay under 5 because it gets dark really fast and it gets too contrasty looking. So I'm just going to do a very, very light, maybe 1 or 2 for dehaze. I don't want to go nuts with that. All right, so let me pull back out. Okay, and again, we can use the eye icon here on the right settings panel. Yeah, so you can see it just made it a little crisper looking. Okay, so that's good. We're emphasizing the details a little better for the conversion to black and white. Okay, so I'll keep moving down these panels. Oh, and one other thing I want to point out, if you're not that familiar or new to Photoshop or working with the camera raw, you have different ways you can set up this panel. I like to keep it so that I keep the panels that I use most frequently open, and then I can open additional panels without these closing. You can set it up in that way, or you can set it up so that they're all always open, or you can set it up that each time you get finished with one panel, they'll all close up and you just go to the next one. So you can just look in the settings to figure out how to set that up if you have any preferences that way. Okay, so now that we're going to detail, I want to work on sharpening and a little bit of noise reduction in this image. So again, I want to add some sharpness because it will help with the conversion. So I'll just, again, no formula. I just do it to where, especially with water, I don't want to see tons of little flecks and too much over sharpening. Let me move in because it's easier to see denoising and sharpening if you pull in. Too much. Okay, I think that's probably good enough. Now, one thing I often like to use is this masking slider here. And what you would do with that is, right now, everything globally is being sharpened in this image. And if you press the Alt or Option key and keep it depressed while you click on this handle, so you can see it's got a white mask. That means white in Photoshop reveals or shows. So that means everything in that image is being sharpened right now. So as you pull that more to the right, and again, I'm keeping Alt Option depressed, you can see how less and less is being sharpened by the sharpening setting. So again, you just move that to where you want it, if you even want to use this. And I basically just want it focused on the edges of things. I'm going to stop there for mine. Okay, and again, I pressed Alt or Option and then drag the masking to control where you want the white mask. In other words, to reveal where the sharpening will be. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do here is some noise reduction. And so I want to grab this here. Now, another thing I need to point out, because this was a JPEG, I only get these manual adjustments. When you open your raw image to work in here, you will see the ability to get raw denoise and raw sharpening. So you can work with those instead, and they will work very effectively for you on a raw image, but I don't have access to them coming in as a JPEG. Okay, so noise reduction. Because this is a pixelated low-res image, I'm just moving the noise reduction a little bit to try to get rid of some of the pixelated jaggies in here. I'm just watching to see where the pixelation goes down a little bit. And I don't want to overdo it with noise reduction. The trade-off is that as you increase noise reduction to get rid of the noise, you're also softening the image. So you kind of want to hit that happy balance between, getting rid of enough noise that it doesn't look plasticky and it doesn't look distracting to have too much noise, but you don't lose the sharpening that you did. So I think for me, I'm going to leave that right where it is. And pull back out again. Okay, so I will close. So see, I can open this. It's going to hold it, and I'll just click this little caret and it closes it up. The next category I want to work with is the color category. Color panel. Okay, and again, if you have a raw image, you will get more options in terms of how to adjust the white balance, but you can at least leave it as shot if you want to. There will be an auto, and then you'll have other options that you can choose also if you are working with the raw image. What I'm going to do is a custom white balance adjustment because, again, this is very green and it doesn't look like a natural shot. And this is one of the reasons for doing the pre-conversion stuff. I'll click on this eyedropper. You can see it's active because there's black behind it. And then what you want to do if you want to do the same approach is click on some neutral tone in the scene. So either a white, a middle gray, or a black. So I'm going to maybe try to click on some of this white foam. Did you see that? What a big difference it made. So let me just watch the image. I'll click the eye icon. Here's the original. And here's what the white balance adjustment did. Now, if you want, you can also manually pull the temperature slider and the tint slider. So it's up to you what you want to do about that. Okay. I'm also going to, as I mentioned, with landscapes, I think of them having some real pop to them. And again, it will, if there is more color infused into your original image, probably more so than you would want if you were going to leave it as a color image, it will, what do I want to say? It'll create better tones or more dramatic tones when you convert to the black and white. So I do want to add some vibrance to this, even though we're not going to keep the color, because it will help the color tones when they translate. So I stay away from saturation because, as I said, saturation mutates colors and it can destroy things and it affects the whole image. Whereas vibrance, you can overdo it with vibrance too, but it will tend to work on the colors that need some boosting and not attack the other colors globally. So with that handle on vibrance, I'm going to just move that up a bit and stay in the safety zone where I don't go overboard. Okay, I'll put mine to about there, about 40. So I've added some vibrance. All right, so let's move on. So that was adjusting the white balance and adding a bit of vibrance in the color panel. And now I'm going to move to the color mixer panel. Let me slide this down and just make a couple of adjustments here. So again, I want to pump up the blue of the sky and I want to dial down this really orangey railroad tracks area in the foreground. So to do that, you see you have all these color swatches here. I'm going to click on the blue. So this one's cyan. I'm going to click on the blue. And you'll see that once you click on it, it puts that little dot to say, hey, this is the color that you're working with. And I'm not going to alter the hue, but I do want to pump up the saturation a little bit. Okay, and then again, I want to temper that with a little bit of luminance, so add some brightness to the saturation. Okay, all right, and then as I said, to me, this is very orangey down in the foreground, and even though we're going to convert it, I just want to take some of that orange out of there. So I'll click on the orange button, bubble, or whatever you want to call it. And again, because to the right increases saturation, to the left decreases, I want to take some of that saturation down. So with orange activated, I will pull this to the left. Let me leave that there. And then again, I think I will put some more luminance in that to maybe just brighten that up a little bit there. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do in the color mixer. So I will then just click on that caret to put that down. And I think the one last thing I'll do when I'm looking at this, to me, this looks a little bit like the water is going to fall out of the image. So I think the one last touch I will do here in the Camera Raw is straighten this image. So to do that, I'll come to the upper right here and I'll click on this geometry icon, which is the second one down. And then what I like to typically do is use the auto and just start with that. So I'll just click on that A for auto. Yep, it did. You saw that, right? It adjusted it and it did bring this side of the image up a little bit. So that's good that we did that. Okay, so I'd say once you make whatever adjustments you want in Camera Raw to your image, then you're ready to go to the bottom of the interface and click OK to take the image to the Photoshop interface. Okay, so now we're back into the Photoshop interface here. So that is the end of the stage one, what I call the pre-conversion adjustments in Adobe Camera Raw. So let me just label this layer as phase one or stage one, which is pre-conversion. Okay, and then maybe I'll just put that that's in Adobe Camera Raw. So you have it here if you want that for reference. And just to show you the difference it made, so here's the original image, and here's the kind of cleaned up, ready for converting to black and white image. Now, I want to do one other pre-conversion step, and you can do this later if you want, but I want to do this interim step here, which I typically just call a cleanup stage. So I'm going to bottom my layers panel, add a new empty layer, which is the box with the plus, and I'm going to use this to do some cleanups. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the remove tool, which is right here. It looks like a band-aid with sparkles, but you can work with spot healing brush. You can use the healing brush tool using clone stamp, whatever you prefer to work with if you feel there's things that you want to clean up that don't become distractions in black and white too. Now, if you're going to, I like to do it on an empty layer because first of all, I think it just works a little faster, but then it also gives me the option to add a layer mask if I want to modify something. But just be sure if you are working on an empty, no content, transparent layer that up here in the options bar across the top, you have it set to sample all layers because otherwise it won't know what to do. It needs to know to sample from the content layers below. The other thing I want to point out while we're here is the mode. I have mine set to auto that Photoshop may use generative AI if needed. If you click that little down arrow, you can set it so that it always uses generative AI, or you can set it so it does not use it. So I like to leave mine on auto, and I'll work with my remove tool on that layer using that. Now, what I am looking for here is things like this, like the white specks, because when I convert this to black and white, those are going to be glaring white. So let me just move in a little bit here. And what I do, so the green is my highlighter so you can see where I am. The white inside is the size of the tool, the remove tool. And I want to make any removing the brush for that just a little bit bigger than the thing I'm trying to remove so I don't have to click too many times. And I just click and it removes. So I'm just going to click around in here, and anything I see that is grabbing my attention as a glaring white, I'm going to just quickly remove it. I'm not going to narrate every click here. Hold on for a moment. Okay, and this one here, I want to keep some of it, but I'll try to see if I can just sort of lessen it. Okay, and I might still need to do more later, but I think that at least gets me, to where, smaller here, so you can see where we are. I got rid of some of the, let me turn this off, the white distractions in there. Okay, so I'm going to leave that like that. And now I'm going to add a stamp layer above this. So what I'm essentially going to do is merge all these layers into a new stamped layer that can become the base for phase 2. So I'm going to click on this add new layer icon, the box with the plus, and then I'll do the claw maneuver, as it's called, where you simultaneously hold Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and E, and that creates a stamp layer. Okay, so now what I'll do is I will duplicate that. I'll just do a Control or Command J. I always do this for sort of my insurance policy, and I'll turn the eye off on that just in case something messes up. We have a clean layer we can go back to. So this is going to be starting into the phase 2 here, all right? And this is the conversion to black and white stage. Okay. All right, so now what I am going to work with to make the conversion is Photoshop's black and white adjustment layer. That's at the bottom of the layers panel. Go to add new adjustment layer, which is the circle with the line. Click on that and come down to where it says black and white and left click, and you get a black and white adjustment layer and an associated properties panel that relates to, so these are the settings, the properties, the settings that are related to that black and white layer. Now, I just want to warn you here, whatever you do, do not go to the hue and saturation adjustment layer and just pull that saturation slider to the left. Do not just desaturate. Also, do not go up to image adjustments and desaturate. Those are destructive and not effective for making artistic black and white conversions. So as I said, I'll include links to other black and white conversion methods from my other videos if you want to try other things. But for this video, we're going to stick with this black and white adjustment layer. Okay. So I'm going to show you 4 different options of ways to use this black and white adjustment layer to make the black and white conversion. And I'm doing that because you might find it very simple for your image to just do a very quick kind of a conversion. Plus, if you're newer and have less experience with Photoshop, you might want to do something that's simpler to start with and then work up to the things that involve more steps. So I just want to give you some flexibility to try different things. So option number 1, working with the black and white adjustment layer, is to come to any of these color channels and just drag the handles on any of the color channels to see how they affect your image. So let me just show you here. So here's red. If I pull to the right, again, it's like what I showed you before. Look at, if you go to the right, it's white. So that means if you pull it to the right and it detects a red family color, it's going to lighten or brighten it. Dark at the end here. So if you pull it to the left, it's going to make anything that it detects as a reddish tone darker. Okay, so you can manually adjust. It's just watch the image, because again, these are not formulas. This is just you do it to taste. You can just the different colors. See what, all right, so that's affecting the sky with the cyans, or you can make it very stormy. If you want very high, if you like very high key images, you can do that, or be very stormy. And I don't think there's much magenta in this. So, all right, so that's option number 1, is after opening the black and white adjustment layer, you can manually pull the color channel sliders and custom tune those color sliders to your taste. So I'm going to say, here's number 1, black and white adjustment layer is custom sliders. I'll just put custom. Okay. Now I'm going to turn the eye visibility off, so that will go away. I'll add another black and white adjustment layer, bottom of the layers panel, so we can look at option number 2. Okay, so now we have a second layer, but this one is invisible. It's turned off. Okay, option number 2 is again to go to the properties panel for that black and white adjustment layer and try clicking on the auto button and see what you think. What the auto button does is it sets a grayscale mix that's based on the color values in your image. And you might think that whatever you click with auto is just perfect the way it is. So you might be finished if you click that and like what you see. You don't have to feel compelled to do something. Or if it makes an adjustment, you say, okay, that's kind of interesting. Then you can, after you hit auto, you can tune these color sliders from there. So let me click auto and see what happens and watch the image versus me clicking auto. Okay, so it made it darker down, and here's primarily where I saw it. So anyway, you can try it for your image. So that's option number 2. Label it up here. Black and white just means black and white adjustment layer, and this is using the auto button. Okay. All right, and so again, I will turn off the eye visibility because I don't want to have all of these stacking on top of each other. Option number 3, after we go to the bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer, black and white. And again, you do not have to go through all these steps. I'm just showing you different alternative options that you can use here. Okay, we've got our black and white adjustment layer. Option number 3 is to work with this targeted adjustment tool. It looks like a little pointer finger with little arrowheads pointing in either direction. This little finger lets you use it in a scrubby manner. Scrubby meaning you can drag it back and forth and scrub across your image to see how it affects the image. So if you click on your image and then drag left and right, it will adjust based on the tones where you have picked. And you do have to be sure that this is black behind here to know it's active. So I'll click here, and if you watch the image, see, I'm just dragging, I'm using mouse. The mouse is depressed, the button is depressed. I'm just dragging left to make it darker and right to make it lighter. And if you watch now you can look over in the right hand properties panel and see what's happening. You can see that it's doing the same thing as if you drag those handles on the slider. Same thing up here. Hopefully the blue will move. Yep, see, so not only does it affect it on the image, but if you look on the right, you'll see that magically that slider is moving on the color channel slider there as well. So that's option number 3, is if you want to work with the targeted adjustment tool directly on your image. And I'll just put finger because that's what the icon looks like. Okay, and then I'll turn that off because again, we are going to just leave those aside for now. And then the 4th option of the way to work with the black and white adjustment layer, and I'm going to step through this. So let me just, bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer icon, black and white. Okay, so we have our fourth option here, and all these others are turned off. So these are not builds, they're turned off. Is I'm going to work with a preset or a combination of presets, or you can work with a preset or a combination of presets. So again, in the properties panel, right here above this target, it says preset. And when you open this up, it is set to the default. If you come across this little down arrow and click on that, you see there's a whole bunch of presets here that are, kind of baked in recipes that you can apply to your image. And you can click on any one of them and see what it does to your image. Unfortunately, I wish you could just hover and go over it. Maybe there's a way to do it that I just don't know. But I have to actually click on these to see what the impact is on the image. So let me just click through these, and why don't you focus over here on the image, and I will read what the filter is I'm clicking on, and then you can see how it changes the tonal values in my image. So here's the blue filter. Here's the darker preset. Here's the green filter preset. Here's the high contrast blue filter preset. High contrast red filter. Infrared. Lighter. Oops, I missed. Maximum black. Maximum white. Neutral density. Red filter. And yellow filter. So as you click through those presets, if you want to work with that versus the custom thing, you might again see something that looks great for your image and say, okay, I'm finished for the black and white conversion. I like that look. I don't need to do anything else with regard to the black and white conversion. But again, for me, I want to give you another option in case you want to try something else, because maybe these presets didn't hit just the mix that you wanted. So for my interpretation, I want to see what happens if I use a combination of presets, okay? So in my image, and you should do this for yours too, think first before you start just diving into making settings adjustments. Think about, where do you want your viewers' attention in your image and on your landscape? For my image, I want the attention in this area here on the stormy sky and the water and the sea that it's kind of whipping up sort of in this pre-stormy kind of stage. I don't want all of this detail down here that I think is just a distraction and will hang up my viewer in getting to the thing that I think is where the drama is. There's just too much going on down here. But I want to use this because look at these lines that could be leading lines and a nice dynamic energy kind of angle pushing the viewer's eye into this area that I want the attention on. So I want to utilize some of this, but with very low detail. I want it to kind of drop out mostly, but without becoming a big black blob. Okay, so your taste might be different than mine. You have to do what you want, but that's how I'm going to try to affect the tonal ranges that I'm using to try to achieve those goals. Okay, I think the saying, have a t-shirt made or something, your intent affects tonal choice. Okay, so for mine, I'm going to, as I said, mix together multiple presets, and I'm going to divide my image into 3 regions. So I'm going to have the railroad region, the ocean region, and the sky region, and I'm going to use a different preset on each of those 3 regions, and I'm going to treat them separately using layer masks for the different presets. Okay, and I just want to be sure here. Yes, I have those off. This is on. Great. The main thing with this, and again, this is where I said right up front, this might be for somebody who's more experienced in Photoshop and wants to experiment. If it seems like too many steps, because it will be more steps, then, stick with the easier options that I just showed you a moment ago. Okay, so again, this is no formula, it's just a process. So here are my steps. We've got the black and white adjustment layer. What the first step is to delete the automatic layer mask that comes up when you open an adjustment layer. To do that, press and hold Alt or Option, left click on that white mask and drag it to the trash bin icon down at the bottom of the layers panel. So now we have the thumbnail for the black and white adjustment layer and no mask on that layer. So what I want to do, I'm going to work from the top down. I want to select the sky, and we're seeing this because it's being affected globally right now, but I'm going to only be converting to black and white each of those 3 regions individually. All right, so as soon as I put the mask, it will only be affecting the sky. So I'll go to the top of the interface to select, come down to sky, left click and let Photoshop think. Okay, so it has made a sky selection for me, an auto sky selection. You can see the marching ants around the perimeter of that area. Now, what it's doing is it will look to put the line, the demarcation line between sky and water right along the line that it perceives. The trouble with if you accept that is that there's color under here, and we're only converting one section, and we're going to be doing 3 different color conversions. So if you leave it like that, color is going to show through. So what you really have to do is push this selection on the bottom end down a little bit into the next region so that there's overlap so that you get full black and white coverage. So to do that, we're going to go up again to the select menu at the top of the interface, come down to modify, and then roll out to where it says expand, because you want to expand that selection down. Left click, and so here's expand selection here. I typically will do like between 2 and 4. Maybe I'll do 4 and see if it's too much, but 3 or 4 should probably be enough to get you down there. So, okay, so once you've put in the number of pixels that you want to expand, for me, down, and click OK. All right, and you can see it has moved it down a little bit, and I don't want this here, so I am going to use my quick selection tool, and I'm going to press the Alt or Option key. Let me make this a little smaller so it doesn't, and try to get rid of this. There we go. Okay, I didn't want that there because that would affect the selection. All right, so now we have our revised or modified selection active. You want to be sure you have the black and white, the marching ants active, and you want to come to the layers panel, come to the bottom of the layers panel to the add new layer mask icon, which is the box with the circle, left click, and there we go. We've added the mask to that layer. So as you know, in masks, what is white shows and what is black hides. So all that's going to be affected by this first black and white layer is the sky. And you can see it has made the conversion to black and white. The rest is still color. But I do see, because it's a soft selection, some blue creeping through here. So you can doctor your masks. To get the mask visible, to doctor it, press Alt or Option and left click on the mask. Be sure that there's a white frame around the mask and that it's active. There we go. So we can see why this is a problem, because there's gray, which means it's not fully being affected here, and there's white down here, which means that will get affected. So the way I am going to doctor this mask is to use a brush tool from the toolbar. So here my toolbar is docked right. Yours might be on the left. And I'm going to use the brush tool, which looks like a little paintbrush. So I'm going to left click on that, be sure there's black behind it. And I want to come up to the options bar. So every tool has options or settings that can be made to affect how it works. So I want to come to this area here where it has a sample of the brush tip. Click that down arrow, and right now it's on soft. I want to be sure we get a nice hard line between sky and the rest of the image. So I'm going to come down to my hard brushes, and I'm going to pick this square one because we have a solid line here, so I don't want to work with a round. Okay. And then just left click up in this area. Okay, to make that square brush bigger, I'm going to hit the right bracket key several times. I'm just going to place this so that it's I'm not doing anything right now. I'm just looking to see how big the brush should be because I don't want to have to do this in multiple steps. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is line up the black brush at the bottom of the black brush so it's on that horizon line there. And I'm going to left click. Whoops. Not what I wanted it to do here. I want to be on white. There we go. Let's try that again. All right, because I'm working on the white part of the mask. So line it up and left click. There we go, that's better. Then press the Shift key because I want to create a straight line across this horizon line. And if you press Shift and then click at the end point, it draws the line for you. So you don't have to try to manually do that straight line. So click, Shift, click at the opposite end of where you want that to draw. Okay, so now we cleaned up the white part of the mask. So now I want to make this blacker down here too so that we don't have drifting that way. So it'll be the same thing, only this time I want black that I'm painting on the black part of the mask. So to switch it, you can either click that little arrow, double arrowhead there, or press the X key, and that makes black the foreground color. So again, let me just be sure. Maybe I'll make this a little bigger with the right bracket key again. Okay, so again, I'm going to left click at this end, and I'm pressing the Shift key, and then I'm going to left click, so I get this lined up here, there. And so now we've cleaned up that mask, so it's a cleaner black and white mask to work with for the black and white conversion. So once I've done that, first of all, I think I'll get off of the brush tool. I always just go back to the lasso as neutral. You don't have to do that. Then it's a toggle, so Alter, Option, click on the mask, and then you've got the image. So now we've got, here's the first preset. So this is step one of the three-phased conversion. So this is black and white. Oops. Conversion step one preset. I'm going to use for that is, what am I going to use? I think I will use the red because I think that made it dark. We'll see. All right, so I'm going to use the red preset for that one. All right, so let's try it and see. So we're on that same layer. We're coming to the properties associated with that layer. As I said, we're going to work with the presets. So click that down arrow, and I'm going to try the red preset for the sky. Yeah, so that looks good because we've got a dark, stormy look to that sky. And you can see the quality is not good here for the low-res stock photo, but don't worry about that. We're just learning how to do conversions. Okay, so we've got the first stage. We're using the red preset. Oh, and this is working at the sky. Okay, all right, so now we're going to work on the next area, which is the ocean. So again, bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer, black and white adjustment layer. There we go. Toss that layer mask. So it's Alter, Option, click on the mask and drag it to the trash can icon. All right, and so now we want to, we're basically just going to keep repeating the process for the different areas. So again, this time I want to work on the ocean. So this time I want to work with, I guess I'll work with the object selection tool. Okay, so I'll left click on that, be sure that's black showing, and that looks like a band-aid with little magical sparkles. And I want to see what I have set here. Okay, I've got sample all layers. I have mine set to remove after each stroke. So I'm sorry, did I say I'm working with the object selection tool? My mind is not working here. Forget what I just said about the remove tool. So I'm going to use the object selection tool to select the ocean. So I want the box with the arrow. Okay, and I want to see if there's anything else I want to show you. Yeah, so this is what I'm looking for. So up here in the top of the interface, you have a couple ways you can set that object selection tool. You can either have it set to lasso or click the down arrow and you can use a rectangle. If you're working with more geometric kind of things, like buildings or stuff like that, then the rectangle might be good. I just like to use it on the lasso because it's a more free form for drawing. So let's try this again. So with the object selection tool, not the remove tool, I'm going to draw it just loosely outside the lasso capability, outside the ocean, so that Photoshop will select ocean area for me. And then wait, let it do its thing. Okay, it looks like it did pretty good. So then once you get it, you do have to just spend more time. And if yours needs some modifying, then you modify the selection that was made. And typically I would use the quick selection tool to modify that. Okay, but this looks good, so I will say it's okay. And hopefully this was overlapped so we don't mind that this is right on the line. All right, so again, with that selection active, I want to come back to the layers panel to the add new layer mask because we've deleted the mask. We want a mask that represents just the ocean. We can look at that again to Alt Option click on the mask. Yeah, so that was cleaner so that we don't have to doctor it. Okay, so Alt or Option to make that go away again. Okay, so now that we have it blocked with the mask, so only the ocean will be affected, now I want to choose a different preset. And I think this time I'll work with blue, because what I am trying to achieve in the water is I want a darker tonal complement to the sky. Okay, so let me try going back to the properties panel for that layer, back to the presets, and I want to try blue and see how it works with the blues in the ocean. I think green would be too subtle. Okay, so let's just look and see what that did. Yeah, so that's darker. It's got more percent. It looks more churned up like it's in a storm with that darker, moody water. So I like the look of that. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that there. So let me just label what this was. So this was the second black and white adjustment layer. This was the water. And I used the blue preset from the black and white properties. There, the blue filter, it shows up. Okay, so now I'm going to do my final region, which is this railroad tracks in the foreground. So again, I have to add another black and white adjustment layer. You know the drill. We're going to throw away the mask. Option Alt left click, drag to trash. Okay, so we have a thumbnail layer with no mask on it. So now again, I'm going to stick with using the object selection tool. I'm going to click on it to make sure it's active as a lasso. And I'm going to trace just loosely outside of the railroad track area and let Photoshop generate an auto selection for me and see what happens. Okay, so here's a good example. So it did not, it helped, but not completely. So you can see the marching ants didn't come out fully to the edge of the frame where the rest of the railroad tracks are. So I do need to adjust this selection. So again, on the toolbar, I'm going to use the quick selection tool, which looks like a little paintbrush with a little lasso from it. Quick selection tool, left click, make sure it's active. And hopefully you can see inside of the black circle inside of my highlighter. Let me use the right bracket, make that a little bigger so you can see it a little better. There's a plus sign, and that means I want to add to the selection. If I press the Alt key or the Option key, it becomes a minus, and you can take away from the selection. So that's how you can use this tool to adjust selections. So since I want to expand the selection, I want to start inside the marching ants and push out, okay? And I made that brush a little bit bigger with the right bracket key so that we don't have to keep clicking. And I'm just dragging along here as I do it, but I'm again staying inside the selection and pushing out. And I think the rest of this looks pretty good. So I will say it's good enough here for what we want to achieve. Okay, so now we have our active marching ants. Bottom of the layers panel, add new layer mask icon, the box with the circle. And there we go. We get the mask for just the railroad area. So anything we do for black and white conversion is only going to affect what's in white on that mask. Okay. So the final preset and the black and white adjustment layer I want to use for this railroad tracks area is the maximum black. I want that, as they said, to pretty much drop out. And you'll see how dark this gets. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. This is really dark here. This is just phase 2 or stage 2 in my 3-staged process. So remember, pre-conversion phase was 1. This is the black and white conversion phase. I will make some more artistic adjustments and some modifications to this stage once I get to stage 3, which is the post-conversion stage. So because I want this to mostly drop out, but just have some subtle indications of what's going on here, to use it as a compositional way to push the viewer's attention here, I'm going to leave this like this for now. Okay, and as I said, you can doctor the layers and, you know, just adjust whatever you want to do here. Okay, so this was the final of my 3 steps using 3 regions with different black and white adjustment layer presets. I'll label this. 3rd area, and that was the railroad tracks, and I believed I used maximum black. Okay. Now, one thing I want to mention, so let me maybe just collapse all of this down. So we have phase 2 is the conversion to black and white, and I'm going to create a group out of all of these. So this was my phase 2. So phase 1 was the pre-conversion. Phase 2 is the conversion to black and white. And we haven't lost all of that. It's right here. So if you click on that little caret next to the group folder, it looks like a manila folder icon, you can go back and work with any of these things, but it kind of keeps it tidier while you're working with it. Okay, so let me mention one tip about this. Now, when I do these demos, I work with native Photoshop adjustments in my videos, so you don't feel that you must buy third-party plugins to achieve the looks that I am demoing. That said, if you own third-party black and white plugins like Nik Silver Effects or DxO or others, you can use them in place of these black and white adjustment layers if you want to. Either globally to make that conversion after you've done your pre-conversion stage, then you might want to work with one of those third-party filters instead of the adjustment layers from Photoshop. You can also keep in mind, so for those of you who are willing to make these customized steps here using the black and white adjustment, you can do that same exact thing and customize which areas of your image are affected even with the third-party plugins like Nik. You can do this same kind of custom masking. Okay, so just, something to keep in mind is, what you want to go for. But you don't have to do that. If you have a global look that you like, that's perfectly fine, and, that is a great way to approach it too. All right, so let's just do a status check where we are after going through phase 1 pre-conversion and phase 2 conversion to black and white. We have the original image, you can see it straightened it, and we have the converted to black and white image. Okay, so now I'm going to move into stage 3, my stage 3, which I'm calling the post post-conversion artistic and finishing touches. Okay, so let me make a new stamp layer just to start fresh for stage 3. So bottom of the layers panel, I like to add an empty layer with the box with the plus, and then do Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and E all at the same time for the stamp layer. This gives us a fresh start there. Okay, so this is the final stage in the demo that I'm going to show you. So in this final stage, what I want to do and what I suggest you do is this is where you can refine the black and white image further, and you can sculpt where you want contrast selectively. You can add light or dark to emphasize depth or direct the viewer's attention or the viewer's eye into the image or to parts of the image that you want to draw attention to. This is also the time to add the output sharpening. If you'll remember up front in phase 1, I told you to do just a very light capture sharpening, just enough so that you have some edges to work with. But really, normally what you would do is you're denoising up front, just a hint of capture sharpening up front, and then do your main sharpening at the end of your whole workflow. And part of the reason you do that is that you'll need different sharpening strengths depending on whether you're going to be showing your image digitally or via print. And even via print, it depends on the substrate. So depending on whether you have a glossy paper or a textured paper, whether you're using a canvas or a metal print, you will use different strengths of sharpening, okay? If you're going to use digital and present your image in digital form, use a lighter output sharpening than you do for print. I'm not going to get into all the different intricacies of that because that's not the point. This is about converting from color to black and white landscapes, but just something for you to look into if you do that. So here's a stage where we can do output sharpening too. Okay, so the first thing I said is adjusting the tone. So let's look at some ways to do tonal contrast post black and white conversion. And again, it's to your taste. You may not agree with how I'm approaching it, so do what you like. One way to add some tonal finishing touches is bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer is with a curves layer, okay? And you'll get, for that curves layer, you get the associated properties, which is the curve, and you can just click and drag, you know, depending on what you want to do with that image, okay? And this is not real. This is, I'm just showing you, you can adjust a curve to taste, all right? So you just do it however you want. And then again, you can decide where you want that curve tone applied depending on what you do on the mask. Okay, so that's one option, is curves. I'm going to get rid of that layer because I don't want to use curves on my image, but just to let you know, that's one post-conversion kind of thing you can do. All right, the second option is, again, layers panel, bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer, levels, okay? So now we've got our levels layer. And as you can see on the associated properties panel, we've got the histogram from blacks to midtones to whites. Now, what you can do with this level is make sure that you have a true black point and a true white point, because as I said right up front with the characteristics, you want the full tonal range in black and white. So I can see based on where this point is that I definitely have a true black in this image. In fact, it's being clipped because it's running up the side of that part of the histogram. So I don't need to worry about that. But it is pulled away from the end of the white end of the histogram. So I probably do not have an actual true white someplace in this image. So what you can do if you want to adjust that is press the Alt or Option and left click on that little handle or any of those little handles and then just start gradually pulling it towards the left for the white handle, and watch the image area where it's a black mask right now. And when you start getting just little flecks, then you have a true white in the image. And it would work the same way. So if it was pulled away from the black, you could press that Alt or Option and pull the black in. And once you start seeing just a few little areas show up in the mask, then you know you have a true black. Okay, so this was And for me, it was the white point, but for you, it could be a black point. Okay, so that's one post-conversion modification if we made sure we had the full range of tones. Another thing is you can add, sort of do a double duty with the black and white and add more drama if you want. So I will, first of all, if I'm going to work with the gradient map to try to add some more drama here, I want to look in my toolbar at the bottom of the toolbar and be sure that my color pickers have black as the foreground color and white as the background color. Then bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer, icon, circle with the line. I'm going to come down to where it says gradient map. Okay. So now we have the gradient map layer added. It's got the gradient from black to white, and you can see it added even more black and white toning to my original image. Let me, from where we, not my original, but from the stage we were at, okay? All right, so I'm going to be sure the eye visibility is on. If we want to adjust this gradient and customize it to suit the image, you left click once on this gradient bar, and that opens the gradient editor. Okay, that's this here. Come all the way down to the bottom, and we're just going to work on this gradient bar down here that runs from black to white. Now, I want to add a little bit more white or brightness because this made this very dark. I want to add a little bit more contrast and mood to that scene, but I don't want to go quite this intense. So I'm going to start with this white handle, and I'm going to pull this to the left. And again, there's no formula. I'm just looking to see something that suits me or my taste. And I could end up adjusting it again, depending on what. And I'm blowing out the clouds. So yeah, so you have to watch for your image. Let me move this over so I can be sure I'm not blowing anything out here. I think that's okay because we still get definition even though it's blown a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to move the midpoint because again, the more you pull this, you'll pull more of the light into the darker areas. So I'm going to work, I don't know why they made this diamond so tiny, but you have to click on that and then pull it to the left. If you want to add more brightness into the scene. There we go, you saw it brightened up. I do not need to make this any darker than it is, so I'm not going to pull the black. If you pulled the black this way, you'll push more black into the image. Once you get yours, if you're going to work with the gradient map set, then click OK at the top of this dialog box to accept it. And so again, yes, I've pushed more drama into the water and the sky. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. Hold on. Okay. All right, so now we did the gradient map and we added more black and white mood to this image. So this is again a post-conversion touch that I'm doing here. So the next thing is this has gone just way too black down here in this railroad area to suit what I want. I do still want some definition and indication to be used as leading lines. So what I want to do next is to do some selective dodge and burn in this area here, and you could also do it in other parts of your image. I mean, you can do it anywhere you want in the image. To do the selective dodge and burn, we want to add new layers. So we'll go to the top of the interface to layer, new layer. So it's layer, new, and then fly out to layer and left click, and we get this new layer dialog. I'm not going to bother to label this. Come down to where it says mode and change it from normal, click the little down arrow, to either overlay or soft light. Overlay is usually more aggressive and soft light is softer, so I like to usually use soft light, but you can do whatever you prefer. Okay, and by clicking on one of those two, we get the option to fill that layer with 50% gray. So I'm going to click on that little box and I'm going to click OK. And you'll see we've gotten an all gray, 50% gray layer. Now, what I want to do is I want to just duplicate this layer because I want one to be dodge and one to be burn. If you do it all in the same and you mess something up, you have to start all over. So I prefer to keep them separate. So I'll just do a Control or Command J to make a copy of that layer. And then I'll double click on the laying on the words there, and I'll write, this is going to be my Dodge. And for those of you who might be newer to photography, Dodge is the same as lighten. The term comes from the darkroom. Okay. And then this is going to be my burn layer. And so that's the inverse. So this is to darken. And let me turn this eye off because we'll start with the Dodge layer here. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to be painting on this image with the paintbrush tool, which again looks like the brush tool, but it looks like a paintbrush. So I'll left click and make sure that's active. And then I want to have this set a specific way so that I don't do this too intensely. So I want to, first of all, be sure I'm working with a soft round brush. So top in the layers panel to be able to work with the options in the options bar for that tool, and I want to use a soft brush, so I'm clicking on that little icon that gives an indication of the brush tip. I'm going to go to the soft brushes. I'm going to use this soft brush right here, and then I'll click here. I want to lower the opacity because I don't want this to be applied too intensely. So I want to, so there's two ways you can adjust this. You can either click and drag on the word opacity, or you can click the little down arrow and slide the slider. I like to just click on the word and drag. And I think I'm going to set mine for around, all right, 30, roughly around 30%, okay? And then I want to be sure, since we're on the lighten layer, the Dodge layer, that my foreground color is going to be white. So you can either click the double-headed arrow or the X key on your keyboard and be sure that you have the white frame. Okay, so now what I want to paint is I want to paint on the railroad tracks to start having them used to push the attention in. So let me just see how big my brush is. I want to make the brush that's inside that highlighter a little bit smaller. Okay, and I'm going to I am not going to be painting right along the edges, because if you brighten things along the edges, that can push your viewer's eyes out of the frame. So I'm going to treat it almost as if this is a vignette, and I'm going to start in a little bit from where I am painting. And I'm just doing a combination of dragging my brush across here or clicking, like click, 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 okay? How's that for narration? And what I'm trying to do is just trying to get shapes and light. So light draws attention in scenes. So if I put some of these angled areas as bright light, it helps to tell the viewer where to look. Okay, and there's these boards that are going in this way. So I want to direct the attention, use them to direct the attention. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go all the way out to the edges. I want to stay in. I'm also trying to think, all right, if there's white clouds, it's going to be putting light down onto this scene. So with these railroad tracks, again, here's your leading lines in, but logically, light would be hitting the tops of those ties or railroad tracks. And there's some down here too. So again, I don't want it directing vision out of the scene. I want it coming into the scene. Right. I think that's enough for that. I might even take some of this away when I get to the burn. All right, let's say that's good enough. Now, one thing I want to show you on this too is you can see where you have brushed. So if I press the Alt or Option key and click on the eye icon, here's what we're seeing here. So this is where, and you can see the places where I dragged versus clicked. And so you can see the areas where it is being dodged selectively in this image. Okay, so then I would just click again with Alt or Option, and then that changes it. And then if I want to work the burn next, I'll click the eye visibility on. Be sure I have that layer active. Keep the same settings in terms of soft brush, low opacity, but because we're darkening, be sure that you have the black as the foreground color that you're going to paint on that layer. Okay, so now again, I said, maybe I will take away some of this brightness that I had in here. So I think to me this gets drawing too much attention. So I'll just keep the little pieces. And this is a repetitive shape, so it could draw attention. This is too bright to my eyes. I'm just clicking to try to take that down. This to me is distracting and it pulls the attention over there. So I'm clicking with the black to bring that down. Might give that one hint just to keep it shadowy. And then I'm going to zoom in to this. And I want to click between the places where I did the ties. So it stays darker down there. I don't want to do it too much because again, the light would hit down there, but I don't want the attention down there with all that detail. See, and you can see, even though I did that cleanup stage earlier, there's still like these little white flecks. So that's why I had said you try to get rid of the distractions. Great, I think that's I've gone back to the dodging here just to lighten that up a little bit. Okay, get out. Yeah, so for me and my taste, I'm going to say this is okay because you might say, oh my God, that's too dark. You just got to, do it to your own taste. But I didn't want much attention here other than to have this serve as pushing the attention in and using some of these ties as leading lines. So I'm saying for me, this is good enough. One thing I want to adjust, I want to put this opacity back to 100%. These settings are what they call sticky. So if you leave that tool and come back, it'll be on 30%. And I don't want to wonder why something isn't working right the next time I come back to the brush tool. So I set it back to the default settings before I leave. Okay, so now I think I might just do another cleanup layer just because bottom of the layers panel, add new empty layer. Right here, just because of the remove tool, I don't like those little flecks of white. So I'm not going to do too much, but just so you know, you can do another cleanup and, get rid of some of those distractions where white might catch the viewer's eye. And in your image, it might be taking away from something you want attention on. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'll just say that's good enough just to let you know that you can do another cleanup if you want. The other reason I like to do that is the next stage, as I mentioned, is going to be a sharpening. And anything that's here is going to get sharpened, so I don't want to draw too much attention to and sharpen things that are distractions even more. So let me do another stamp layer, bottom of the layers panel, new empty layer, or new adjustment, a new layer, Shift, Control, or Command, Alt, Option, and E. Okay, and then this is the layer I'm going to base the sharpening. So now this is when we would do the output sharpening as I referred to before. So the areas that I want to sharpen are the sky and the water. I'm not going to sharpen this area. Just like how bright draws attention and dark recedes, areas that are sharpened in an image pull attention and softer areas tend to recede. So I'm only going to sharpen these two areas since that's where I want the attention. Okay, so I'm going to go to Filter, Other, High Pass. So Filter, Other, fly out to High Pass, and that's what I'm going to use for sharpening. Okay. And when we're using this, and I'm going to label this in just a minute. You can see I have a click to show the preview. So what you want to achieve here is for it to only have very slight lines. I mean, unless you really want to go crazy, but it should just be very subtle lines. So I'm going to start and sharpen the water first. So I'm just watching where the water is in here. And you would pull the radius to the left to make it less intense. So you can see it's fewer intense lines. I just want Be a little bit too little for a video. Let me just make it a 2 so it shows up. Okay, so you can see you just want subtle edges of things showing up in the sharpening with this. This is even a little bit intense, but for a choppy C, I'm gonna go with that for the video. Okay, click OK once you get that set the way you like. And then I'm gonna make this the ocean or the water. Okay, and I don't want to have to start all over again. Oh, and I guess it's pretty important to show you this too. So when it comes back, it'll come back gray. So you need to add a blend mode to be able to reveal the image. And again, overlay will be more harsh or more aggressive, and soft light will be less intense. So I like to use soft light. Okay, so we've used, oops, it turned itself off. I've used the soft light blend mode on this high pass sharpen layer to apply it and be able to see the image. Now I want to just apply that to the water. So I'm going to go back to my phase 2. I don't want to have to start all over again, so I want to reuse the mask that I made for the water, which is right here. So in order to reuse a mask, you make a copy of it. So you press and hold Alt or Option, keep it depressed, left click on the mask you want to make a copy of, and I'm keeping the mouse button depressed and the Alt Option depressed, and I drag it all the way up to that sharpening layer. And so now the sharpening with high pass is only being applied to the water because it's only in the white area there. Okay, and then I'll do something similar again with the sky and the clouds and make them a little bit more defined. So again, it will be Filter, Other, High Pass. We get the high pass dialog, and I want them to be a little bit more intense because I don't think the clouds are going to show up as well. Oops, I didn't do the right thing here. Hold on just a minute. That's all. Let me add a new layer here. Okay. Filter, other pass. There we go. It's better. All right, and this time I'm going to do the sky. So I'm going to do a little bit more for the clouds because you can see they're not showing up very much in the lines on the gray, if you can see it. Just dragging it till I see. That's okay. I'm seeing lines in the clouds there. You may not see them. It might be a little bit much. So let me take it down just a little bit. And then click OK. Once you see just a hint of the lines where you want the sharpening, click OK. And again, I'm going to change the blend mode soft light for that layer. This is going to be the sharpened or high pass sky. Okay, and I'll do the same thing as I did before. I'll come down to the previous sky mask rather than start over again because I'm lazy. And I'll press Alt or Option, then left click on the mask and drag it up to that high pass layer for the sky. So we've added the sky mask to that layer. So now the only thing that's being sharpened is the sky on that layer. Okay, so we've got 2 different sharpened layers, so that's good. So let me add another stamp layer just to be sure we're not going to impact anything here. Again, that's Shift, Control, or Command, Alt, or Option, and E to get that stamp layer. Now, this may have gotten a little dark. Yours might get a little dark if you're adding more contrast and things like that. So you may want to optionally, as your post-conversion stage, add a little brightness or contrast. So bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer. Here's brightness and contrast. And I think I'll just add just a hint of brightness because, again, I don't want to blow this all out. It's already getting a little bit bright there. I don't mind it being a little blown for the look that it's going for. For my own, I might have spent a little more time and reduced that a little bit. And then very little contrast because that'll just emphasize the blown and the harshness of the white. So I'll just do maybe a 1 on that. Yeah, so you can see, watch the clouds. It just brightened them up so they look a little less dingy. Okay, so that was good with that. So I would say, that was sort of my main post-conversion kinds of things to work on, was being the brightness, the contrast, the sharpening, and the tonal adjustments, and then the dodging and burning. But let me just, because I like to, so you could be finished right there, all right? And let's just look and see where we are here. Right, we went from the original image to that. So it's, it's a pretty dramatic and it might be over the top. So, you just decide for yourself. If this is too much, you can always take it down with the opacity a little bit, pull it to the left and reduce on any of these black and white conversion layers if it's too much, like especially where I added the extra gradient map. If that was too much, you could have taken opacity down and just tempered that a little bit. Okay, so let me add another stamp layer for some optional finishing steps for you, just in case you want to play some more. Again, you don't need to do all this. This is just to show you things in case you want to play. All right, so if we add the sky mask again to this layer, so again, Alter Option, click on the mask with the sky, something like that. You might want to play and go up to the top of the interface to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. Okay, and then you would, maybe map the angle. You can click on that little widget and adjust the direction of the blur. So if the clouds are going this way, if you want a sort of surreal look, you could leave it where these are blurred, and then you could, and you can adjust how blurry it is by this slider here. Okay, so that looks like long exposure, but this clearly isn't long exposure, so this becomes a more surreal kind of look. If you want the whole thing to look long exposure, then again, in different stages, you can select the different masks and give both of them some motion blur. So it just depends on the look that you're going for. I'll say okay, but I'll turn that off. Okay, so that's one option, is to add some motion blur. Another option, if you remember back to the initial example pictures I showed you at the beginning, most of the two of them, I think it was Adams and Brandt, had a sort of a warmish filtered look on it, and then Kenna's was a little cooler looking. Because mine is water, I'm going to go with what Kenna did, and I think I want to put a little bit cooler or a blue filter on mine. So bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer, photo filter right there, left click, and in the properties associated with that layer, you can pick a color, or again, there's the moral equivalent of presets. So there's warming, cooling, and all these individual colors, and they've got cyan and whatever. I think I'll just put a little bit of a cooling filter on there so you can see it makes it definitely bluer for the sky and the water, but that's like way intense for me. So if you want it even more intense, you can go to the right. If you want it more of a hint of the coolness, then you can, come down like that. Okay, so to the left would be less density and just a hint of the photo filter. To the right would be more density and pretty aggressive looking photo filter. All right, and then the one last thing that I think I will show, and again, I'll add a stamp layer just so there's a solid content layer work with here, is to optionally add a vignette, and the vignette will frame the image, and it's another way to subliminally push the attention or direct the viewer's attention into the center of the image. So to add the vignette, that's what I'm going to do here. I'll go to the top of the interface to filter, camera raw filter, wait for the interface to open, go to the effects panel, and here's vignette. If you want to add a white vignette, you would pull it to the left. If you want it darker, did I say left? I don't know right from left anymore. If you want a white vignette, you pull it to the right. If you want a darker vignette, you pull it to the left. I want darker, so, and let me just see what we're doing here. Right. And let me turn the eye. So watch the image. You can see it's pretty subtle. So there's no vignette. Yeah, so it just helps to direct attention. And sometimes you want one that's more aggressive. I would say if you want a subtle vignette, stay in like the 11 or 10 to 15 or 11 to 15 range for the vignette. If you want to be more aggressive and make a statement, then you can go outside of those bounds. Okay, once you get your vignette set, you would just click OK to accept it and go back to the Photoshop interface. And so what we have ended up with, again, I turned off the motion blur, is the before color landscape and the after black and white conversion. So that is the end of the step-by-step demo. So just a reminder, I will include links to some of my other black and white tutorial videos in the description below this video. And those tutorials do feature different styles of black and white, as well as different conversion methods. So you get high key, low key, minimalist, whatever. So you might want to check those out if you want to try some different approaches or experiment. I will also include the links to the topic start times throughout this video in that description, and they do have links. So if this is too much to sit through in one shot, or you want to revisit to just regroup and get the steps for the processes again, you can click on the start time links and just take you to the certain areas that you want to watch again. So anyway, I'd say just have fun experimenting with different fine art black and white landscape looks, and take care.